Within a dark and menacing castle, the Demon Lord is getting ready to begin his conquest to take over the world, and to do that he summons his 4 demonic generals. Almandra the Inferno, Sylphid the Storm, Genome the Earth, and finally summons the most cynical and soulless of them all, an underpaid Japanese salaryman. Denisuk started working for his company as an insignificant salaryman, but he was hope-filled and surely he would make his way up the promotion ladder at some point. However, while Denisuk was working hard for the sake of the company, his colleagues were all kissing up to their boss, so they ended up getting promotions while Denisuk ended up getting shipped off to another country to work on expansion. Upon arrival, Denisuk found that literally nothing was getting done because the site had no funding. He tried to convince his boss to approve more funding so they could buy the necessary equipment, but that would cost money, so his boss refused and yelled at him for wasting money. The locals couldn't care less about the job if they weren't going to be given the necessary tools, so they left, and Denisuk ended up having to do everything by himself. However, after seeing how hard Denisuk was working even though he was by himself, the locals were inspired and soon returned to help him out, but just when he finally got everything up and running, he had a call from his boss, and at first, he thought his hard work was finally being recognized, so he would be getting a much-needed bonus, but he was dead wrong. It didn't even throw him a pizza party. All he got in return for his hard work was even more work, as they decided to transfer him to another country for a separate expansion project. By this point then, Denisuk had begun to question his life choices because he realizes that he is wasting his life for a company that clearly doesn't care about him, but while he is distracted by his existential dread, he isn't paying attention to his surroundings, so he ends up getting run over by a motorbike. That kind of explains how he ended up here, but Denisuk thinks there must have been some kind of mistake because there's no way the Demon Lord meant to summon a guy like him. However, the Demon Lord calls him by name and tells him that he summons him here to become his new overseas manager. He's received extensive reports on all the hard work Denisuk had put in. He was assigned to an overseas branch of his company, learned the local language, and gained the trust of the locals to successfully run the new business. That is why the Demon Lord thinks Denisuk would be the perfect candidate for one of his 4 elite generals. Denisuk is kind of happy since this is the first time anyone has ever actually acknowledged all the hard work he has been putting in, but he's a bit hesitant to accept the position of Demon General because that would technically mean he is betraying humanity. However, the Demon Lord mentions that the position will come with full workers' benefits, and all of a sudden, Denisuk doesn't think joining the Demon Army is such a bad idea anymore. On top of that, the Demon Lord actually respects workers' rights, so he won't force Denisuk to accept the position if he doesn't want to. All this makes Denisuk really want to join. When he thinks about it, he remembers how he was always treated like trash back in his old company, and he doesn't think trash like him deserves to have such an important job, so he's about to reject the Demon Lord's offer, but before he does, the Demon Lord yells that he can't let the way he was treated at his former company dictate his worth. That place was run by obnoxious and selfish managers who only cared about themselves, so they would never pay attention to all the work Denisuk was putting in behind the scenes, but the Demon Lord won't make that mistake because he is well aware of how valuable Denisuk is as an employee. So will he choose to go back to his old company and be treated like trash once more, or will he stay here and help build the Demon Army? Denisuk is still a little hesitant to accept. All of a sudden, Almandra speaks up and says she objects to the idea of having a weak human in the Demon Army. Sylphid and Genome also object to the idea because they can't see how someone like him could possibly help the Demon Army. The Demon Lord understands why they would be skeptical, so he decides to put Denisuk through a test to show the others just how capable he really is. Denisuk starts freaking out and tries to explain to the Demon Lord that he has no powers, so he can't fight, but it's already too late because Almandra has decided to attack him at full force to see what he's made of. She heard something about otherworldly humans possessing special powers, so tells Denisuk to try and stop her deadly kick. However, before the kick could land, the Demon Lord steps in front of her and stops it. Almandra asks why the Demon Lord interrupted her, but he points out that she didn't wait for him to finish talking, so she ended up misunderstanding the situation. Look at poor Denisuk over there, he got so scared that he passed out from the shock. The others are surprised because Almandra wasn't even trying that hard, so for Denisuk to pass out from an attack like that, it makes it seem like he's just a regular human. The Demon Lord tells them that Denisuk really is just a regular human, and that makes them all object to the decision even more. The Demon Army is made up entirely of monsters, so if a human were to enter the power struggle between the demons and demi-humans, then he would get eaten alive almost instantly. The Demon Lord admits that there is a bit of friction between the factions of his army, but that's exactly why he needs Denisuk and his skill set. He doesn't expect him to have a sturdy body or incredible attack power, but rather what he expects from him is his resourcefulness. Just then Denisuk finally regains consciousness and begins pleading for them to let him go because there's no way he can deal with attacks like what Almandra just tried to hit him with. The Demon Lord tells him to calm down and explains that he won't be expected to fight, but the Demon Lord does intend to give Denisuk a fitting exam. He explains that the demon army is currently trying to create a pact with the surrounding tribes, and so far, they've managed to reach an agreement with the salamanders and werewolves, but negotiations with the Minotaur tribe has been quite difficult, so Denisuk's test will be to do whatever it takes to form a pact with the Minotaur tribe. With Denisuk's superb negotiation skills, it should be simple enough to gain the Minotaur's trust and reach an amicable agreement, but Denisuk doesn't see anything simple about negotiating with Minotaur. However, the Demon Lord seriously believes he can pull it off, so he tells Denisuk to ask Almandra if he has any questions. Afterwards, Almandra leads Denisuk down the hall so he can begin negotiating with the Minotaur, but she thinks this is a huge waste of time since there's no way a human like Denisuk can negotiate with Minotaur. Denisuk thinks she's right about him being useless, but the Demon Lord seems so sincere when he was talking about how much he needed Denisuk, and all Denisuk has ever wanted was to have his hard work recognized, so he wants to live up to the Demon Lord's expectations of him as much as he can. Just then Almandra tells Denisuk that they've arrived at the meeting room where the chief of the Minotaur tribe is staying, and Denisuk is a bit shocked by the sheer size of the room, but Almandra explains that it's perfectly normal since the Minotaur are big monsters, and as a fair warning, she tells him that Minotaur are known to be quite ferocious, so if he's not careful he's going to end up getting himself trampled to death. As Almandra opens the door, Denisuk has no idea what to expect from the Minotaur chief, but he intends to do his best to negotiate no matter what. However, once he actually sees the Minotaur chief, he freaks out. There's no way he could negotiate with someone like Terius without instantly dying. Almandra feels bad for him, so she offers to help him out with the negotiations, and Denisuk is really thankful for the help, but then he sees Almandra start arguing with Terius, so he gets the feeling that negotiations aren't going so well. Almandra doesn't understand how Terius could be dissatisfied with everything they provided for him, and Terius says she doesn't understand what he's saying, so no headway is made on the pact, and Almandra leaves the meeting room. Almandra really doesn't understand why it's so hard for Terius to agree to the pact now when he was initially open to the idea. Just when they were about to finalize the agreement, he started yelling no over and over again. Almandra came back several times to see if he would agree to the pact again, but all he would ever say was no, so she couldn't understand what he wanted. Almandra can't possibly see a resolution, so she's going to leave the rest for Denisuk to figure out, although she fully expects him to fail miserably. Denisuk starts having a full-on panic attack because he thinks there's no way to get around this mess, but as he is walking through the halls trying to figure out what to do, he spots a bar sign and decides to head in to clear his head. The bartender gets him a warm towel to calm him down, and Denisuk orders a drink while he sits down to think. He would like to work on the negotiations, but there's nothing he can do if the client refuses to negotiate. However, Denisuk then realizes that Terius might not actually be refusing to negotiate after all. He has experienced a situation like this before where a client was constantly telling him no, but when he looked into the client's eyes, he could tell what he really meant, and both sides were eventually able to reach an agreement. He now knows what he needs to do, so he finishes his drink and heads outside to do what businessmen do: negotiate. Meanwhile, Almandra is back in the Demon Lord's throne room giving a report about her conversation with Terius, and it didn't lead to any meaningful breakthrough, so she doesn't think Denisuk will be able to achieve anything either, especially since he just arrived in this world today, but the Demon Lord still has faith in him, so he tells her to wait and see what Denisuk can accomplish. She doesn't understand what the Demon Lord sees in Denisuk, but she decides to go check up on him to see if he's alright, and when she does, she finds him in the process of stuffing several bags with hay. She asks him what he's doing, so he tells her that he intends to go have a good conversation with Terius. She tries to tell him that it's pointless since he's not willing to negotiate, but Denisuk still thinks there's a chance. He just needs to look Terius in the eyes and convey his emotions properly so the two of them can understand each other. Almandra notices that Denisuk looks a lot more confident than he did before, and without an ounce of fear this time, he walks into the meeting room to talk to Terius. The next morning Almandra comes into the meeting room to check if Denisuk is still alive, but when she looks inside, all she finds is a room full of hay, and neither Denisuk nor Terius inside. At first, she thinks the negotiations must have failed, leading to a massive fight, but just then Denisuk comes in and tells her everything is fine. In that case, she demands to know why there's hay all over their sacred demon castle, and more importantly, she asks where Terius went. Denisuk tells her that Terius is currently finalizing the pact agreement with the Demon Lord, but Almandra can't believe Denisuk managed to get him to agree in just one night. He explains that he simply took the time to get to know Terius well, and that made the negotiation process really easy. Almandra had thought Terius was refusing to negotiate because he kept yelling no over and over, but in reality, Terius thought negotiations were going really well. Denisuk had experienced something like this before with an international client, and the client in question was really enthusiastic about saying no to him, so Denisuk thought the negotiation was going to end in failure, but to his surprise, the man then reached out for a handshake, so he realized it was all a misunderstanding. The same thing applied to Terius of Denisuk did a little research into Minotaur's culture, and found out that Minotaur always bring hay with them to act as their bed whenever they go to someone else's home, so all that time he was just trying to ask for his hay, and when Denisuk figured that out, there were no more problems with the negotiation. Now Almandra realizes that she had misunderstood Terius and left him in that room to sleep on the cold floor, so she feels really bad, but Terius tells her it's all right since it was an honest mistake, and shakes her hand to show that there are no hard feelings. As Terius is leaving, the Demon Lord comes up to Denisuk and Almandra and asks Almandra if she now understands why he wants to add Denisuk to their ranks. Almandra admits that Denisuk really is skilled when it comes to negotiating, and since he passed the Demon Lord's test, the Demon Lord officially makes him one of his 4 generals and puts a bracelet on his arm as a symbol of his position, and as a sign of her new respect for Denisuk, Almandra formally introduces herself to him, and says she looks forward to working with him as a new friend. Denisuk is finally starting to settle into his role as one of the demon generals, and it's nice that he's got his own office and a supportive boss, but this place is still going to take some getting used to. Since he is officially one of the demon generals now, he thinks he should formally introduce himself to the others, so he heads to Sylphid's room and knocks on the door. To his surprise, a girl answers the door and asks what he wants, so Denisuk tells her he's here to introduce himself to Sylphid. The girl then coldly tells him that she's Sylphid's assistant, and he's a very busy man, so she can't let Denisuk disturb him. Denisuk is disappointed, but he knew he was bound to face some pushback from the other demon generals, so he decides to just come back later to try again. However, before he could leave, Almandra comes running up to him because she has something important to say. The Demon Lord has another assignment for Denisuk, so Denisuk goes to meet with him immediately, and is informed of an agreement he is working on. For the demon army to grow in strength, he needs the support of all the surrounding demi-human tribes, and among all those tribes, the Ogre tribe is particularly influential. They possess a military force equal to that of the demon army, and as a result, it could become a threat to the demon empire if they were to become hostile. That is why the Demon Lord wants to have a merger negotiation with them so they can combine their forces, but the ogres are notoriously difficult to negotiate with, so nothing has been decided on yet. However, with Denisuk on the case, the Demon Lord is sure he will be able to reach an agreement with them, so he's granting him full authority on the matter. Denisuk is glad to see that the Demon Lord trusts him so much, but there's a real chance of him dying to the ogres if he goes alone, so Almandra volunteers to escort him to the ogre tribe. However, before that, Denisuk says he wants to go meet with Genome since she's in charge of the demi-human division of the demon army, and she might have some valuable information about the ogres. Almandra thinks Denisuk is right, but she absolutely refuses to go anywhere near Genome because she has generational beef with her, so instead, she says she'll go check on the carriages while Denisuk talks with Genome. Denisuk heads out into the training grounds where Genome is holding her daily training session, and he is impressed with what he sees because not only are Genome's men skilled in combat, but she also keeps their morale really high. Once training is done, she turns to address Denisuk and asks what he wants. Denisuk tells her he's here to ask if she knows anything about the ogre tribe, and she doesn't know much, but she tells Denisuk that their leader ogre is notoriously difficult to have a conversation with, so he's going to have a hard time negotiating with him. There's nothing she can really do to help him on this one, and she would never want to work on anything with Almandra anyway, so she asks Denisuk to get her out of here. Denisuk didn't even realize Almandra had been standing behind him, so he asks her why she's here, and why she's so angry. Almandra says she already finished checking the carriages, so she came to get Denisuk since she was worried about him, but she kept containing herself after seeing Genome, so the two start arguing, and Denisuk is starting to get worried about how much Almandra and Genome hate each other. Denisuk and Almandra eventually arrive at the Ogre Castle, but before they could enter, they are stopped at the gate and told to wait until Ogre gives them permission to enter. Almandra thinks it's ridiculous that they are being kept outside so long, but Denisuk has seen this before and knows Ogre is just trying to use this to throw them off so they won't be able to negotiate. That's why it's important that they keep their cool, but Almandra is on the verge of exploding in rage. Thankfully, before she gets act out, Ogre's assistant comes out and tells the two that they may now enter, but as they walk in, Denisuk notices how scruffy Ogre's armor look. Eventually, they make it to Ogre's throne room and come face to face with Ogre himself, but when Almandra tries to start the negotiations, he tells her to shut up. He doesn't care why they are here because he's never going to listen to what they have to say unless, of course, they came to surrender him. In which case he might hear them out, but only if they agreed to kill their chief, the Demon Lord. Almandra can't believe the levels of bad words she just heard from Ogre's mouth, so she's about to crash out right now, but Denisuk grabs her hand and tells her to calm down because a violent crash out is exactly what Ogre is hoping for. He then turns to Ogre and in his most polite businessman voice, he says he and Almandra are going outside to have a brief chat. Outside, Almandra lets out all her rage and curses the very existence of Ogre for daring to say such a thing. She's fully prepared to go back in there and tear Ogre limb from limb, but Denisuk calms her down and tells her they can't react to his provocation because that's exactly what he wants. He intentionally saying things to get them angry in hopes that they cause a scene so negotiations break down. That way he can avoid directly rejecting the negotiation and blame its failure on the two of them. Now that she knows what Ogre was trying to do, Almandra decides to calm herself down, but she's still really frustrated by the fact that Ogre insulted the Demon Lord. To be honest, Denisuk is just as angry, but acting on that anger would only hurt their chances of success here, so they have to be careful about how they respond. With that said though, Ogre isn't willing to negotiate, so there's not much they can do at this point. Just then the girl from before shows up and she introduces herself as Ogre's daughter Orliula. She knows this may come off as rude, but she has a request to make, so she asks for Denisuk and Almandra's help in taking the throne from her father. She leads Denisuk and Almandra to an empty room and explains that this is the food storage, and as they can see it has no food. The ogre is known for its strength and influence among the demihumans, but recently, they've run into financial trouble and has gotten so bad that a lot of their people are struggling to find food to eat. Denisuk then assumes something like this was going on because when they came in, he saw the terrible state of the ogre's equipment along with the cold and empty feeling he got from the castle itself. This kind of situation usually occurs when large companies begin to decline. They make it seem like everything's going well, but on the inside, they are constantly on the brink of bankruptcy. That's exactly what's going on with the ogre tribe, and Orliula believes that the only way to rebuild it is to rely on the demon army's help. However, her father refuses to listen to her, and on top of that, he is currently sick. They've been trying to keep this fact hidden, which is why they had Almandra and Denisuk outside while they prepared him for the meeting, but his condition just keeps getting worse and soon, he is going to pass away. If Ogre were to die with things as they are now, it would be the end of their tribe, so she pleads with Denisuk to help her. Denisuk says he understands her concerns, but he also scolds her for sharing such vital information. As the daughter of the chief, she needs to be more careful about the people she trusts. When Orliula can tell that Denisuk is a good person, she's pretty confident in her ability to discern the nature of people, which is why she told him about the situation, and now she asks Denisuk to help her save the ogre tribe by marrying her. After hearing this, Denisuk freaks out and Almandra begins burning with rage, but Orliula is serious about her proposal. All the ogres in her tribe are as dumb as rocks, so the only way for Orliula to ensure the prosperity of the demon army is for a smart guy like Denisuk to marry her and become the new chief. Denisuk tries to talk Orliula out of making any rash decisions, but Orliula is convinced that this is the only way to save the ogre tribe, so she's willing to make their marriage official immediately, but Almandra doesn't let that happen. Later that night, Denisuk is sitting in his office and wondering how he's going to get himself out of this mess because Ogre refuses to negotiate with him and Orliula wants to marry him. He can afford to fail on his second assignment for the Demon Lord, so he decides to go to the bar in his head so he can clear his thoughts. However, this time he's not alone because Denisuk's imaginary version of Almandra is sitting at the table next to him arguing with the bartender about which is cooler, gorillas or lions. Realistically, a gorilla is mopping the floor with a lion any day of the week, but Almandra counters saying lions are cooler because a group of lions is called a pride. As soon as Denisuk hears this, he snaps out of his trance, and he now has a foolproof idea of how to handle this. First thing the next morning, Denisuk calls Almandra outside and he apologizes for waking her up so early, but he needs her help so they can go do some negotiating, but for Denisuk's plan to work they need to go somewhere else first, and if all goes well then Ogre is the one who will be begging for a negotiation meeting. 1 week later, Denisuk and Almandra are called into the chief's throne room just like Denisuk had planned, and Ogre looks pretty mad. He just found out that all the surrounding tribes formed an alliance with the demon army over the past week, and he wants an explanation. A week ago, Denisuk told Almandra about his plan to recruit the smaller tribes first instead of trying to convince Ogre. It shouldn't be too hard because just like the Ogre tribe, the other tribes are struggling with the food shortage, so they can be swayed by the promise of support. Almandra understood Denisuk's plan, but she didn't expect it to work so well by forcing Ogre into negotiations. Denisuk's strategy was based on something he had to do when he was selling a product back on Earth. If he tried to approach a big company directly, he would usually be rejected, so he decided to first market to all the smaller companies and sell them his product, and eventually the big company would be forced to contact him and ask for the product as well, so they wouldn't be left behind. Similarly, if all the surrounding demihumans joined the demon army, then the prideful chief wouldn't let that go without a response. For now, Denisuk plays dumb and acts like he simply offered to form an alliance with the smaller groups because they were struggling to survive and needed the support of the demon army, but that makes Ogre even angrier since he never agreed to any negotiations. Everything is going according to plan because now that Ogre has lost his cool, he is much more susceptible to Denisuk's negotiation tactics. Denisuk then starts explaining that the alliances weren't formed by him alone because he had help from Orliulu. Ogre can't believe that his own daughter would betray him like this, but she tells him that it was necessary for the sake of their Ogre tribe. The only way out of their current situation is to rely on the demon army's aid, and as much as he may not want to admit it, times have changed. He's grown old, is currently sick, so they need to join the demon army if they are going to survive. Just then Denisuk chimes in and offers an alternative to Ogre. Instead of joining the demon army, they could form an equal partnership. To be honest, Denisuk just made that thing up because he hasn't changed anything about the deal, but if he says it's an equal partnership, then the proud Ogre chief is bound to be more willing to accept. As expected, Ogre doesn't seem opposed to the idea, but he asks them to give him some time to think it over. A couple of days later, Almandra comes running into Denisuk's office to tell him the good news. She tells Denisuk that Ogre has just agreed to the alliance with the demon army, and that's great news, but right now, Denisuk has more important things to worry about. The demon lord told him to pick out an assistant for himself, so he spent the past few days looking through applications to find the right person. Honestly, he wishes he could just pick Almandra since she's so reliable, and Almandra misunderstands this to be Denisuk's way of proposing, so she gets a little embarrassed. Just then there's another knock at the door, so Denisuk goes to check who it is and finds Orliulu there. She tells him she's here to act as a representative from the Ogre tribe for their alliance with the demon army, and she's incredibly grateful to him for his help since her father has become a lot more diplomatic ever since their encounter. She says she's willing to do anything to show her gratitude, and since she said anything, Denisuk asks her if she would like to become his personal assistant. Orliulu is more than happy to take the job, but Almandra is jealous, so she refuses to look Denisuk in the eye and reminds herself that they are rivals, so she can't be friends with him. Denisuk has no idea why she suddenly started acting so strange, but that aside, this has been a good month for him since the demon army has grown quite a bit, but whenever there's growth, there's also increased risk, so everyone needs to keep their guard up. A couple of days passed and Denisuk is working in his office as usual when Orliulu comes in and tells him she has reached an agreement with the Bearman tribe like he asked her to, so as long as he meets their conditions, they will support the demon army. Denisuk is glad to hear that thing went well with the Bearman tribe, but there's something else Orliulu wants to tell him. She'd heard that Denisuk is going to be rewarded for all the hard work he has been putting in, and the award ceremony is going to be held soon, so she'll tell him about it after his lunch break is over. Denisuk has no idea what he's going to be awarded, but with how the demon lord treats him, he can be sure that it will be better than a pizza party. Just then Almandra comes into Denisuk's office with some lunch for them to share as they always do, but while Denisuk loves eating with Almandra, he hates the fact that the only food available in the demon army is bland porridge. He understands that there are limitations to the logistics of feeding an entire army, but he still wishes he could at least have some meat to go with the porridge. Almandra hears Denisuk's complaining and she has the perfect solution, so if Denisuk wants meat, then they're going to go get it from the source. Denisuk really doesn't like the idea of going hunting just so he can eat some meat, but that's not the only reason old Almandra brought him out here. She actually received a request from the demi-human tribes living nearby asking her to exterminate a magical beast that has been attacking them in this forest. So far, 5 orcs have been killed by this thing and Denisuk thinks that's terrible, but Almandra sees it differently. It's perfectly natural for the weak to be eaten by the strong, and normally it would be Orc tribe's job to defend themselves from any threats like this, but the beast in question is far too strong for them to defeat, and Almandra can't let the Orc tribe be slaughtered, so she agreed to handle it for them. Speaking of which, Almandra notices some mushrooms growing under a tree, and from what she was told, all the orcs got eaten were attacked while picking these mushrooms since they are a valuable ingredient. Therefore, the magical beast must be camping somewhere around here. If they wait long enough, then it's sure to attack. Evidently, they didn't have to wait long since the boar shows up behind them almost immediately, so Almandra tells Denisuk to run for cover while she handles this. She jumps into the air and heel kicks the boar's face into the ground, but in retaliation the boar starts using its horns to throw rocks at Almandra, and although she can easily dodge them, Denisuk can't, so he's freaking out. The boar starts smashing through trees and is heading straight for Denisuk, but before he could get hurt, Almandra lands a clean punch to the boar's stomach. From what he can see, it's clear to Denisuk that Almandra is strong, but so far none of her strikes have been fatal. It wouldn't matter if this was just a regular fight, but right now their goal is to hunt this thing, so what she's lacking is killing power. The boar has sharp tusks to attack with, so a single mistake on Almandra's end would be fatal. However, her blows only cause blunt force trauma, so she is going to end this quickly. Then Denisuk thinks she needs a weapon. He was right about one man's blows not being strong enough to kill this thing as she is now, but she has been holding back so far. She doesn't like using her true power because it takes a long time to recover from the effects, but she won't be able to kill this thing otherwise. The boar tries charging at her again, but this time Almandra is able to stop it with one hand. She could easily kill it with a single punch right now, but that might ruin its meat, so instead, she picks it up and snaps its neck. Now that the boar is dead, Almandra tells Denisuk they can eat meat now, but honestly Denisuk has lost his appetite. They drag the boar's body to the orc village so they can show the villagers that the boar has been dealt with, and all the villagers are really grateful for what Almandra did, as well as impressed that she was able to take it down on her own. Almandra is really enjoying all this praise, but that aside, it's rare to get so much meat, so Almandra invites the entire village to share the boar with her. The villagers are all excited, but Denisuk can't believe they are actually okay with eating boar meat when that thing was one evolution cycle away from being their next-door neighbor. However, he's even more surprised when he hears Almandra say she's going to cook the meat. He asks her if she's really serious about cooking, so Almandra offers to give him a taste of her homemade delicacy. Denisuk is actually getting excited since Almandra is making it sound so good, but when he asks her how she plans to cook, she just chucks a fireball at it. The result is this lump of charred flesh, and we can tell by the look on Denisuk's face that this meat is straight trash. Almandra tells him to just give it a try because it's better than it looks, but Denisuk takes a bite, and it tastes just as bad as it looks. This meat tastes like someone poured hot tar in his mouth, and he'd honestly rather starve than have to suffer through another bite of this. Almandra tells him it's rude to insult someone's cooking like that, but Denisuk tells her it's rude to call what she just did cooking. He has been enduring the culture shock of living in a new world so far, but this is too much for him to handle, so he asked if everyone can let him handle the cooking from now on. Once Denisuk is done cooking the meat, Almandra takes one bite and realizes this actually tastes amazing, so she asks Denisuk what he did. He explains that first he soaked the pork in water to get all the blood out, and then he slow roasted it over a fire to remove all the excess fat in there, and finally adding it to a soup helps get rid of any bad smells. He offers to teach the villagers if they want to learn, and the villagers are glad that one of the demon generals is being so thoughtful, but Almandra doesn't think it's necessary for someone as high-ranking as Denisuk to spend time teaching villagers how to cook. Denisuk tells her she's wrong because his job is to improve the demon army, and a big step in the development of any civilization is their culinary advancement. It's natural for people who eat meat often to figure out different ways to improve the taste, but because meat is so rare here, no one can afford to experiment with it. In other words, this country is poor and lacking in knowledge. It sounds harsh when he puts it that way, but Almandra can argue since he's correct. This country is mostly barren, and compared to the surrounding nations, it is pretty weak, but that's exactly why they have to work hard to make a change as part of the Big Four. Since they are done here, Almandra suggests that they should return to the castle, but Denisuk doesn't think that's a good idea since it's already dark out. However, Almandra tells him it won't be a problem since she can illuminate their path with this fireball. She is really proud of her magic prowess since it's an ability unique to demons, and Denisuk is quite impressed. It also makes sense why demihumans who can't use magic train day in and out to become effective fighters, while demons like Almandra can rely solely on their magic, but he thinks Almandra could stand to improve her combat techniques a little. For instance, Even though her attack power rises dramatically when she uses her true power to transform her body, it takes a while for her body to recover afterwards, so he suggests that she should bring a weapon with her to help with combat next time. He also suggests that she should wear armor that covers more of her body, but after he says this, Almandra stops dead in her tracks and puts out her light. She understands that Denisuk may be right, but his focus on efficiency is insulting to her, so she's way too mad to be around him right now. She dishes Denisuk in the forest, and Denisuk is left wondering why she got so mad, but before that he's almost guaranteed to get eaten if he stays out in this forest, so he runs back to the orc village for safety. The next morning Denisuk meets with the Demon Lord to give a report on the mission, and the Demon Lord congratulates him on his success, but he heard that Almandra returned last night, while Denisuk only arrived this morning while being escorted by the orcs, so he wants to know if something bad happened between him and Almandra. Denisuk breaks down, and says he's not worthy of being one of the demon army's generals. The Demon Lord tells him to calm down, and explain what happened, so Denisuk tells him everything. The Demon Lord can tell that Denisuk inadvertently offended Almandra, but what's important now is that they make amends for the sake of the demon army, so he officially orders Denisuk to find a way to make up with Almandra, but that's easier said than done. He recalls how proud Almandra was when she said that demons are the only ones who can use magic, but there has to be more to it than that, so he starts reading a demon history book to see if he can figure something out. He soon finds a chapter talking about how a ton physique is essential for a demon's magic power, which is why demons take great pride in their bodies and often wear extremely revealing clothes. Denisuk now understands why Old got so upset, because when he told her that it would be more efficient to wear armor that covers her body more, he was basically rejecting her pride as a demon, but even if he knows the reason she got mad, he has no idea how he's going to repair their relationship. Meanwhile, over in the castle, Orlula has just finished chopping up the firewood for the day, and she's about to go handle her next task, but she is shocked to see a menacing wall of death in front of her. Almandra is really upset about what happened with Denisuk, so when she sees Orlulu, she runs to her crying that Denisuk hates her and refuses to praise her body. Orlulu has no idea what's going on at first, but after Almandra explains what happened, she realizes where the misunderstanding might have come from. She tells Almandra that as a human, Denisuk's values are a lot different from theirs. In particular, Orlulu knows that Denisuk doesn't think exposing your body is a good thing, but Almandra can't believe it since she's been exposing her body to him for weeks, and he never complained about it. Orlulu explains that Denisuk probably just thought Almandra was some kind of exhibitionist, so he never questioned it. Upon hearing this, Almandra suddenly realizes that if Denisuk was uncomfortable with her exposed body, then all those gestures of bodily affection she had shown him probably did come off as some sort of deviant behavior. She's so embarrassed and angry at herself for ditching Denisuk in the forest as she starts smashing her face into the floor, but Orlula begs her to stop because the floor can't take much more of this. Almandra asks Orlula for advice on what she should do now since she got mad at Denisuk for no reason, so Orlula tells her about a discussion she had with him when she first became his assistant. He told Orlula that he wanted her to stay true to her desires no matter what, because he wanted her to feel free to talk about any troubles she had so they could come to a solution together. Regardless of any misunderstandings, Orlulu is sure Almandra can make up with Denisuk as long as they talk it out. Denisuk and Almandra eventually find each other in the castle stairwell, and they both got something really important to say, so Almandra tells Denisuk that she's not a hoe, she just wanted him to compliment her body, while at the same time Denisuk tells her that he thinks her body is hot. They both take a moment to process what the other said, and since it seems like they are both on the same page, Denisuk apologizes Almandra. He didn't know much about demons and hadn't realized that what he said would be insulting to her. Almandra accepts his apology, and also apologizes to Denisuk because it wasn't his fault that he didn't know about demon culture, and even if she was mad, she shouldn't have left him in the middle of the forest alone. Denisuk did nearly die because of that, so Almandra is really guilty, but since he ended up being okay, Denisuk says he forgives her. He's glad they were able to make up, and now that they've gotten the chance to learn a little about one another, Denisuk thinks they can become great partners. Although he still doesn't realize that Denisuk interprets the word partner as a marriage proposal. Later, the Demon Lord gathers all his subordinates because he has a special announcement to make. After forming alliances with the various tribes, his demon army has grown far stronger than it used to be, and this is all thanks to the diligent work of his newest general Denisuk, so in light of his achievements, the Demon Lord is presenting him with this magic stone. Denisuk feels greatly honored to receive such a valuable stone, but he cannot accept it because he didn't do the work alone. None of this would have been possible if he didn't have Almandra by his side, so he walks up to her, gets down on one knee, and asks Almandra to accept the stone with him. Almandra is happy, but she freaks out that Denisuk is doing this in public with so many people watching. He's not aware of this, but presenting a magic stone to a girl is quite literally the definition of a marriage proposal in this world, so he just proposed to her in front of all the demon army leaders, and the only reason she didn't immediately accept is because she's embarrassed with everyone around. A couple of days later, Denisuk is called into a meeting with the Demon Lord, and he's terrified because he thinks he did something wrong, so as a preemptive measure he begins apologizing and begs to keep his job. The Demon Lord is surprised by Denisuk's reaction and tells him he isn't in any kind of trouble. They literally held an award ceremony for him the other day because of how good he is at his job. With that said, the Demon Lord has something he wants to discuss with him. He asks Denisuk what he thinks of the current relationship between the demi-humans and the demons of the demon army. From what Denisuk has seen firsthand, it looks like the demi-humans feel inferior to the demons, since only demons are capable of using magic, and that's exactly what the Demon Lord has been trying to address, so he asks Anus to find a way to make it so everyone can use magic, because that way the demi-humans will be able to stand next to the demons as equals. Denisuk thinks it's a good plan, but there's one major problem with it, since Denisuk can't use magic in the first place, so how is he supposed to figure out a way to allow everyone to use it? The Demon Lord realizes that it's a daunting task, but that's why he gifted Denisuk a magic stone, and he gives Denisuk full authority to decide how he will use it to accomplish his mission. However, he won't be able to do it on his own, so the Demon Lord assigned a magic specialist to help. The specialist is Sylphid, and the Demon Lord assures Denisuk Sylphid is really good when it comes to magic, but Denisuk still needs to be a bit careful because Sylphid is a major pain in the ass to deal with. Denisuk says he understands and leaves the Demon Lord's throne room to go find Sylphid, and as he does this, Almandra is watching him from behind the railing. She's been spying on Denisuk any chance she gets for the past few days, partially because she's interested in finding out how his work is going, but also because she's still giddy with excitement from Denisuk's marriage proposal a few days ago. Denisuk soon arrives at Sylphid's room, so he knocks at the door, but the person who answers is Belinda, and she tells him that Sylphid isn't here right now, so he's going to have to come back later. She then tries to close the door on him, but Denisuk sticks his foot in the door and insists on coming in anyway. Almandra saw all this happen, and she's starting to get upset that Denisuk would flirt with another woman after he already proposed her. Meanwhile, inside Sylphid's room, Belinda tries convincing Denisuk to leave since Sylphid isn't here, but he's not that story since he knows Belinda is really Sylphid. Belinda tries to deny it, but Denisuk has two good reasons to believe that she's lying. First, he has memorized the list of all demon army officials, and there's no one named Belinda on peril, and secondly, the Demon Lord already snitched on her and told Denisuk that she likes to disguise herself to get out of work. Sylphid has clearly been caught, so she admits that Denisuk is right about her, but he still doesn't understand why she would pretend to be her own assistant. Sylphid simply explains that if everyone knew her real identity, then they'd start giving her tons of work to do, and she hates work. Be that as it may, Denisuk has some work he needs to discuss with her, so he asks Sylphid if she can spare some time to talk about magic tools with him. However, Sylphid flat out refuses to do anything that requires effort, even if it's under direct orders from the Demon Lord. Besides, she already made something like that in the past, so she has no reason to recreate it now. Denisuk has no idea that Sylphid had tried making magic tools in the past, and since he seems pretty interested, she decides to let him to see her invention. She pulls out an object and informs Denisuk that it is made of a mineral base that allows magic to move through it easily with pieces of magic stone layered on top of it. With this setup, it can be used to cast all types of magic, and that sounds exactly like what Denisuk is looking for, so he asks Sylphid if he can have permission to mass produce it. Sylphid tells him he's free to do what he wants, but this prototype costs 50 million to make, so he's going to need one hell of a financial scheme to fund mass production. After all, the device requires high-level magic stones to be used in its construction, so of course it would be costly to make. Denisuk is still shocked after learning how expensive these things are, and he now understands why Sylphid never put these into production, but he simply can't let himself give up yet, so he asks her if it would be possible to reduce the number of spells the device can cast. From what Sylphid told him, the device requires high-level magic stones to allow it to cast several different types of magic, so he suggests limiting it to a single spell. Sylphid is intrigued because she had never thought of it that way, and after a little thinking, she confirms that limiting the device to one spell would significantly reduce the cost, since low-level magic stones could be used in production instead. She's really impressed that Denisuk was able to come up with that idea in such a short amount of time, and it just so happens that he has a magic stone on hand, so he asks Sylphid if this will work. Sylphid is starting to get invested in this idea, and since they already have all the necessary materials, she's ready to be in work right away, but she needs an assistant to help, so she drags Denisuk down into her basement, and she doesn't plan on letting him sleep all tonight. Meanwhile, outside Suit's room, Almandra is starting to get suspicious and wonders what Denisuk could be doing in Sylphid's office with a woman so late at night. The next morning, we see Denisuk sitting on the basement floor barely conscious due to a lack of sleep. Sylphid is equally sleep-deprived, but she's also really excited because she managed to completely redesign her magic tool to cast a single spell. Now this thing can be mass-produced for a fraction of the cost of the old model, and it's all thanks to her genius. However, before they can begin mass production, they still need to test it, so she tells Denisuk that he's going to be the test subject. Denisuk pleads with her to at least give him some time to rest since he's on the verge of collapse, so Sylphid allows him to leave, but she says she's only giving him a 1-hour break before he comes back so they can start testing this thing. As Denisuk heads back to the front door, he's about to open it, but before he could do anything, Almandra barges in and demands to know what Denisuk has been doing all night. Almandra's actions led to Denisuk getting knocked out, so she gets on her knees and tries to shake him until he wakes up, but all the shaking is just making him dizzy. Just then Sylphid comes out of the basement, and she's wearing her usual outfit, so Almandra won't realize that she was the woman from before. Almandra is starting to question if what she saw earlier was right, but all of a sudden Almandra's assistant Lilim and Oryalu enter the room as well because there's a huge emergency. A flock of Asiato birds has just attacked a few villages, and if nothing is done soon, then those villages will be destroyed. Asiato birds are large flightless birds that are known for their vicious nature, and they are so much of a threat that the Demon Lord has ordered that they do whatever it takes to drive those birds away. That's why Lilim came looking for Almandra, since she's the only person capable of dealing with such a large flock. As she's being dragged away, Almandra expresses her disappointment since she wants to spend time with Denisuk, but Sylphid sees this as the perfect opportunity to test out the new magic device, so she intends to bring Denisuk out to the battlefield. Once they are outside, Denisuk tells the locals to stand back a bit since what they are about to do might be dangerous. Sylphid sets the magic stone to cast a simple fire magic spell and hands it over to Denisuk so he can give it a try. Before that, Denisuk asks her if this thing has any safety features, but Sylphid assures him that even if it explodes, Denisuk will only lose an arm, but that doesn't make him feel any better. He decides to test out anyway despite the risk, so as the flock of Asiato of birds approaches, Sylphid instructs him to start channeling power from the device. It makes a strange sound when Denisuk powers it up, but Sylphid tells him that's just how it operates. Now she wants Denisuk to imagine that the device is an extension of his own body, and let the energy flow until it accumulates in his right hand. Denisuk follows her instructions, and before long, he has formed a fireball in his hand. Denisuk is amazed that he was actually able to use magic, and since the first phase was a success, Sylphid tells him to begin attacking the birds. Denisuk isn't sure if this will work while he throws a fireball at one of the birds anyway, and it burns it. Sylphid encourages him to keep going until he has taken care of all the birds, so Denisuk continuously chucks fireball after fireball, and for the first time since he came to this world, he feels like he's really strong enough to win a fight. However, that feeling of power is short-lived because in the next moment the magic device burns out, so we can no longer use magic. One of the birds closes in on Denisuk and is about to kill him, but before that could happen, Sylphid raises a barrier around him. Denisuk tries using the device again, but this time it just seems to be slowly attracting the birds instead of allowing Denisuk to use magic. Sylphid takes care of the birds that were coming after Denisuk, and then she asks him why he isn't using the device to cast magic anymore, so he shows her the crystal, and it's clearly been overloaded. It looks like low-level magic crystal aren't enough to maintain the device after all, so this experiment is a failure. For now, they did manage to drive the birds away, so the villagers celebrate by making a pot of stew with the bird meat. While Denisuk is getting a bowl of stew, Sylphid is over by the tree playing with one of the demi-human children. Denisuk comes over and expresses his surprise because he was under the impression that all demi-humans were strong, but he had no idea that some of them were this weak. Sylphid agrees with him, but even though they are weak, demi-humans like them are still very kind, and it reminds her a bit of her past. Sylphid was born into a merchant family of elves, but things went wrong, and she ended up getting kicked out. She then lived as a wanderer for a while until she was welcomed into a village of demi-humans. The demi-humans were extremely kind to her, but none of them could use magic, and because of that, they lived in poverty. Sylphid wanted to help them, so she set out to invent a device that would allow them to use magic, but along the way, she got distracted and forgot her original reason for all of this. She turns to Denisuk and tells him that her goal as a researcher is to help people, so they need to make this project a success no matter what, especially since more of those birds are bound to attack this village again. Denisuk thinks about it for a minute, and he comes up with a great idea, so he asks Sylphid if she can make more of those magic devices by tomorrow morning. Since she already created the designs, it shouldn't take long to make more, but she won't be able to make any improvements to the design without her tools. Denisuk tells her she doesn't need to make any improvements since what he's trying to do will work with the current design. The next morning, Denisuk and Sylphid head out to confront the flock of birds charging towards the village, and before the birds could make it all the way here, Denisuk activates the magic devices that he had stuck in the ground ahead of time. The sound from all the devices powering on at the same time is so disturbing to the birds that they all change their minds about attacking the village and run away, and best of all, since no actual spells were ever cast, the magic stones in the device will last for a very long time, meaning they can keep the remote villages safe while also saving on costs. The Demon Lord is greatly pleased with the innovation the two of them achieved, so he commends them both and asks Sylphid to begin mass production of the magic devices so they can be distributed to all the villages that need them. A little while later, Denisuk meets up with Sylphid to thank her for all her help because he never could have achieved this result on his own. Similarly, Sylphid thanks Denisuk for his help because he got her excited about her research again, and reminded her that she's doing this to help people. She's truly grateful, so she tells him that if he ever needs help with something he can come ask her, and before she leaves, she gives him a magic device she made it especially for him. The other ones could only handle 10 spells at max, but this one can handle at least 30, so it should help him if he ever finds himself in danger. Denisuk then returns to his office and he is more motivated than ever to get his paperwork done, but before he could even start, he gets knocked out when Almandra comes barging in. She just heard about the whole research assignment with Sylphid and she wanted to apologize to him for thinking he was flirting with another woman even though he proposed to her, but then she sees him unconscious on the floor, so she rushes to his side to see if he's okay. Later on, Denisuk invites Almandra out on a shopping trip, and Almandra was so nervous about it that she went to Oryolu and asked for some advice. Being asked to go shopping with him could mean only one thing, so Almandra is certain that Denisuk asked her out on a date, and since that is the case, she plans to pull out the big guns to impress Denisuk. Almandra intends to wear nothing but this bikini to showcase as much of her body as possible, but Oryolu tells her that might not be such a good idea. Denisuk would be uncomfortable with that much exposure, so it might be a better idea to go with something a little more conservative. Denisuk followed Lulu's advice, and thankfully Denisuk seems to really like her outfit, so she thinks this date might go well and her relationship with Denisuk might go to the next level. Unfortunately, this is Denisuk we're talking about, so the only reason he called Almandra out to go shopping was because he wanted to research the market, and Almandra is seriously bonded when she realizes this isn't a date after all. She's practically burning with anger, but she still wants to help Denisuk out, so she asks him what kind of research he is conducting. Denisuk explains it's always a good idea to get the opinions of the locals because it might give him a different perspective and help him improve the demon army. Although for now he says he just wants to enjoy the scenery with Almandra, which catches her off guard, but this is still not a date though. As they approach one stall, the stall owner happens to recognize Denisuk as one of the elite demon army generals. Denisuk is surprised that people know who he is, but there have been rumors going around about a human that the Demon Lord personally summoned, and Denisuk's suit makes him stand out quite a bit. The man also recognizes Almandra, and since she and Denisuk are out here together he assumes they are on a date, but Almandra denies it because Denisuk already made it clear that this trip is work-related. She explains that they are here to conduct market research, and since that's the case, the man offers to show them some of his finest goods, a set of pure gold ornaments, and since it's not every day he gets patronized by army generals, he even offers to give them a discount if they purchase these 2 cups as a pair. The man begins explaining that these cups are usually bought for couples that are getting married, but without giving it a second thought, Denisuk says he wants to buy this for himself and Almandra, which gives Almandra mixed signals since this looks like Denisuk is trying to flirt with her, but in reality, he just bought the cups so he could get some information from the shopkeeper, so Almandra is once again disappointed. After a little more investigation, Denisuk sits down with Almandra to have some coffee while he goes over the results of their research. According to his findings, the recent alliances formed with the other demihumans' territories have been well received by the people, so the different cultures are integrating nicely. However, this has also led to some negative side effects. Specifically, the increase in population has caused an unprecedented food shortage, and the price of staple crops like jimu are too high for people to afford. Almandra noticed the rising prices too. She went to one of the food retailers and demanded to know why they were making jimu so expensive, but even while being violently shaken, the retailer told her that he can't afford to lower his prices, otherwise he would go into debt. The price of jimu is definitely being inflated, but if the retailers aren't the ones doing the price gagging, then it must be the work of the wholesalers. Wholesalers are the ones in charge of distributing goods after bulk purchases from farmers. Usually this arrangement would work fine, but there's the chance that the wholesaler might be artificially raising the prices of the jimu to maximize profits, and since the retailers are forced to buy at the inflated price, they too must increase their prices in order to stay in business. Since the whalers are likely responsible for this, Almandra thinks they should march into their building and demand that the prices be made normal. However, Denisuk doesn't think that's a good idea, since what he said about the wholesalers being responsible is still pure speculation right now, and they can't risk making the wholesalers angry because it could cause a national disaster if they aren't careful. Wholesalers are managed by a large commercial guild and they command a fair bit of power, so before they act, they need to gather more information regarding the matter. With that said, Denisuk says they are done with their market research for the day, but there's still a lot of time before they have to return to the castle, so Denisuk asks Almandra if there's anything she wants to try in the meantime. Almandra is excited since this might be her chance to have a proper date with Denisuk, but then all hope of alone time with him goes out the window because Genome shows up. Denisuk is surprised to see her here and asks if Genome came out to do some shopping as well, so she explains that today is an important day for her people, so she's here to buy gifts for the people she cares about. In this case, she's buying gifts for her comrades from the demon army, but she's still got beef with Almandra, so Almandra won't be getting anything from her. Just then Genome is approached by two rat demi-humans, and they plead with her to help save their store from bankruptcy. These two seem pretty desperate, so Denisuk and the others decide to follow them back to their store and ask what the problem is. The rat couple explain that they have run the store for years and sold a food called kamozu, but year after year their sales have been declining, so they have been struggling to stay in business for a while. However, recently they were approached by a big merchant named Budagarian, and he placed a large order with them, claiming he could make a nice profit reselling the kamozu since jimu is so expensive nowadays. The couple was delighted to hear such good news, so they worked tirelessly through the night using every last ingredient they had to fill Budagarian's order. Unfortunately, this morning when he was supposed to pick up the order, he suddenly backed out of the deal and said he wasn't interested anymore, so the couple is now stuck with a massive amount of unsold product, and if they don't do something soon, they'll go bankrupt from all the money they wasted. The problem is definitely serious, but Genome can't think of any way to solve it, so she turns to Denisuk because she had heard that he's a good problem solver. She asks him if he has any ideas on how they can help the couple save their store, and thankfully with the information he gathered from the market today, Denisuk says he has the perfect solution. Genome asks if he is really sure he can handle this, so Denisuk assures her that his plan will work, meaning she can leave the rest to him. The first step in Denisuk's plan is for the couple to verbalize their goals, so he asks them to clarify what they want to achieve. Kamozu expires within 1 day, which means they have to sell all 300 servings that the couple prepared by the end of the day. Denisuk tried some of the kamozu earlier, and it seems pretty similar to the mochi from Japan. However, is missing one key aspect. Much like mochi, kamozu doesn't have a distinct flavor on its own, therefore it can be combined with all sorts of side dishes and spices to make it more exciting. Now the only thing to do is decide what flavor they would like to add to the kamozu, so he asks the couple about their usual customer base. They answer saying that since kamozu is a traditional food, it isn't really popular among young people, but now it is even losing popularity among old people as well, and to be honest the couple can understand why, since they too are getting sick of the bland flavor. Almandra can't believe the rats chose to continue selling kamozu when even they don't like it anymore, but that's beside the point. They don't have much time before the kamozu goes bad, so Denisuk suggests that they split up the workload. He and the couple will stay here and think of good flavors to pair with the kamozu, while he wants Almandra to go to the stores he wrote down on this list and ask for their assistance with his plan. After gathering everything they need, Denisuk heads out into the market with a drum set to draw the people's attention. He tells them that today is Ria Day, so they are all welcome to join in on the festivities that he has prepared. The people in the crowd seem intrigued since it looks fun, but they have no idea what Ria Day is supposed to be, so Denisuk begins explaining. From what he learned, the holiday is based on an old legend involving a pretty girl and a man selling kamozu. One day the two happened to meet in the market, and they instantly fell in love with one another. However, there was a powerful man who wanted to make the girl his bride, but since she clearly wasn't interested in the king's proposal, the king got jealous and forbade her from ever meeting with a man she loved again. However, the two of them still snuck out to meet one another, and under the star-night sky, they both ate kamozu and wished that they could live together without meaning to sneak around. That's when their prayers were answered by the heavens, and the two of them were pulled up into the night sky to live happily ever after. This legend is the basis of the Rhea festival, and it is said that if you exchange kamozu with a loved one and eat it together with them, then your wish might come true. The crowd seems really intrigued by Denisuk's story, so they want to buy some kamozu and try out the tradition, and it just so happens that Denisuk knows a couple who have a boatload of kamozu in stock. Most people know kamozu to be boring and tasteless, but after some brainstorming with Denisuk, the couple managed to change that, and came up with these new and exciting variations. The people start buying a ton of kamozu, and even though Olmandra had full faith that Denisuk would find a way to pull it off, she is still surprised that he managed to convince all these young people to eat a snack that was meant for old-timers. Denisuk explains that when the popularity of product is on a downward spiral, it can be restored by switching the target customer base. Earlier, when they were doing their market research, Denisuk realized that there were a large number of young people and their families in the market, so who better target than them? With the new marketing strategy and flavors, Denisuk wouldn't be surprised if kamozu became the best-selling item in the market overnight. In fact, he's already thinking of plans that open chain stores and expand overseas to increase profits, but Olmandra just snaps him out of his business frenzy. Later that night, a crowd has started dying down, so Denisuk and Olmandra go to meet the couple, and the couple can't thank them enough for their help because they managed to sell all their stock thanks to them. Denisuk tells them not to worry about it because their success wasn't because of him alone. It was also due to their own hard work, Olmandra's help, and Genome as well. Genome may have left at the start, but during the day Denisuk get heard from a few of the demi-humans that Genome had recommended this store to them, so she must have spread the word of the kamozu store to help them out. Still, to show their gratitude, the couple offers Denisuk and Olmandra a plate of kamozu to share, and Denisuk happily accepts it. Olmandra begins blushing because she remembers the part of a legend that says you share kamozu with someone you love, so for Denisuk to be so eager to share some with her can only mean one thing. She tries not to get her hopes too high, but then Denisuk pulls out the wedding cups he bought earlier, and says he wants to give one of them to Olmandra. The evidence that he wants to marry her is overwhelming at this point, so Olmandra asks him what he plans to wish for while they share the kamozu, and without skipping a beat, Denisuk answers that he plans to wish for the success of his next project, so Olmandra is once again disappointed. Later that night, Denisuk goes to meet with the Demon Lord because he has something important to discuss with him. During his market research today, he managed to discover a lot of useful information, but most notably he discovered these golden ornaments for sale. These ornaments originated from a nearby nation known as Golden Country due to its abundant gold mines, so if the Demon Lord plans to expand the demon army, Denisuk suggests that they should establish trade ties with the Golden Country. The Demon Lord thinks this is a great idea, so he says they will begin trade negotiations as soon as possible, and he knows the perfect thing to trade. He pulls out one of the magic devices and says they will trade these with the Golden Country, but Denisuk doesn't think that is a good idea since the magic device is technology that only the demon army possesses, so they shouldn't sell it off so easily. However, the Demon Lord sees it differently. No matter what they do, the technology will eventually be stolen by outsiders or replicated, but something that can't be replicated is personnel, so as long as the Demon Lord has talented individuals like his 4 generals around, he is sure they will be able to create even greater magical devices in the future. He gives Denisuk permission to handle all negotiations on the matter, but he also warns him to be careful because the king of the Golden Country is a formidable man. The day soon comes for Denisuk to begin the negotiations, and he is getting ready to travel to the Golden Country to meet with the king. Before he sets out, Olmandra meets him by the carriage, and she suggests coming along since she's worried Denisuk might get into trouble, but this negotiation is meant to be his first solo mission, so he says he has to do it on his own. Olmandra understands that he wants to do this on his own, but she warns him that the king of the Rampage Country has a really short temper, so Denisuk needs to be careful about how he talks to him. For example, the king once fed a merchant to a crocodile because he kept trying to sell him a carriage extended warranty, and upon hearing this, Denisuk is starting to get worried as well. He still has to go though, so Denisuk's carriage sets out, and as he leaves, Olmandra shouts words of encouragement, and reminds Denisuk to stay away from the Golden Country's women. After a long journey, Denisuk finally arrives in the Golden Country known as Rampage, and it is as lively as the rumors say. It's glad he chooses to pursue negotiations with this country because until now, the demon army has only exported crops such as jimma for foreign exchange. However, due to the sudden increase in population, not only is the demon army using up its entire jimma supply but has also had to rely on the importation of those crops as well. To fix this, Denisuk plans to trade for something valuable like gold, and what better place to acquire gold than from the Golden Country. Denisuk is easily able to secure an audience with the king thanks to his position as one of the demon army's elite generals, and after few moments the king of Rampage enters his throne room. Denisuk lowers his head to greet the king and begins introducing himself, but the king already knows everything there is to know about him. He knows that he was summoned to this world a few months ago as one of the demon generals, and since then, he has both expanded the demon army's influence and implemented several reforms. By all accounts, the king believes Denisuk is a talented person, but there's still one thing he doesn't understand. If he has been one of the demon army's generals for several months, then why is this the first time Denisuk has come to greet the king? The king is clearly upset and Denisuk doesn't know what to say, so he starts apologizing, but with the way things are going it looks like negotiations might break down before they even begin. The king then asks Denisuk if there's reason he called for this meeting, so Denisuk points to the cart behind him and says he has brought an offering for the king. He lays out a collection of the finest silverware the demon army has to offer, but this is the king of the Golden Country we're talking about, so he is gravely insulted that Denisuk would dare to bring him silver as a gift. The king is in a foul mood now and Denisuk apologizes, but this was actually all part of his plan. He then pulls out the magic device and says he will offer it to the king as an apology since he was unhappy with the silver. At first, the king isn't impressed by the device since it is clearly made from a low-level magic stone, but while that may be true, Denisuk informs him that this magic device is capable of driving magical beasts away. It is an original invention of the demon army, so it is impossible to get it anywhere else, and Denisuk happens to know that the Golden Country has a bit of magical beast problem in their minds. The king doesn't deny it, so Denisuk goes on to explain how he heard about the rock golems that terrorize the mines, interrupting the work of miners and forcing the king to hire a dedicated mine defense force. However, with these magic devices he could completely eliminate the need for a defense force while also ensuring the safety of the miners and increasing productivity. He then shows the king a small collection of rosmarin and tells him that these will be his offering for today, but if he thinks they would be useful then he is welcome to purchase more from the demon army. The king finds Denisuk's proposal intriguing. He would definitely like to buy more, and only if Denisuk can prove that what he said about the magical devices is really true. With a snap of his fingers, the light goes out and the king's pet crocodile is released right next to Denisuk. If Denisuk is telling the truth about the magic devices, then the king believes you should have no problem driving the crocodile away. This is a terrifying way to test someone and Denisuk is internally freaking out, but he is also confident in the performance of the magic devices, so he holds up one of the devices up and activates it to scare the crocodile away. The device works, but as the crocodile moves away from Denisuk, it sees the king and decides to go after him instead. Denisuk sees this and tries to use one of the devices to shoot a fireball at the crocodile, but it turns out that Denisuk's help wasn't necessary because the king easily strikes the crocodile down and turns into ash. He is impressed that the magic devices really do work, but he is also impressed with Denisuk as a person. Even though Denisuk is a commoner, he has the spirit to stand before the king as an equal. He is talented in negotiations and immediately prepared to act when he thought the king's life was in danger. The king has taken a liking to him, so he says he will buy the rosmarin from the demon army, and as payment he places 3 gold bars before Denisuk. With this amount, Denisuk says the demon army can prepare 200 units within the next month, but the king is an impatient man, so he says he is only giving them 1 week to prepare the units, and as compensation for the shortened time frame, he brings out several tons of gold. Negotiations turned out to be successful, but creating 200 units in 1 week will be a tough order to fill. Denisuk is asking Sylphid if there's a way to make 200 in time, but she tells him straight up that it's impossible. They've only recently begun mass-producing the rosmarin, but as to crank out that many in just a week is unreasonable. Denisuk pleads with her to see if there's something she can do, but she can't just pull an extra 50 workers out of nowhere. Plus, local demand for the rosmarin has also been on the rise, so she says they are already overworked as it is now. She scolds Denisuk for accepting such a large request without considering the on-site workload, and Denisuk admits that he may have messed up, but then he thinks about the situation and remembers seeing the logistics report of the rosmarin distribution a few days ago. According to the report, priority had been given to the areas with magical beast issues, so overall rosmarin demand should be pretty low right now, meaning Sylphid was lying to him about being understaffed so she could get out of doing more work. Sylphid realizes she's been caught, so she has no choice but to agree to fill the order, and she promises to make the 200 units by next week. However, just then a messenger from the Golden Country runs in and tells them that the Golden King was so impressed by the rosmarin that he wants even more, so that 200 order is actually going to be 300 now. Anyway, through tons of hard work and overtime, The production team manages to create the 300 units within the 3-week time frame, and now if they've met their quota, Denisuk can finally relax. Oryulu congratulates him for managing to fulfill the order, but speaking of which, she has been wondering how much Denisuk sold the rosmarin for. Denisuk tells her got the Golden King to pay 50,000 bucks for each rosmarin, so for the 300 units he ordered, it comes out to 150 million. Oryulu can't believe Denisuk actually managed to convince the Golden King to pay that much, but it was all thanks to his carefully thought-out psychological attack. Since the devices are still unknown, they can set the price to whatever they want, so to establish the rosmarin's value, Denisuk first brought out some expensive goods as gifts for the king. He intentionally chose silverware so the Golden King would be angered, but even if he rejected the silverware, he would still acknowledge that they are objectively valuable goods. That way, when Denisuk brought out the rosmarin, it would automatically seem like it was incredibly valuable. Oryulu had no idea Denisuk could do such a thing, but she is really impressed. She asks him if he planned to receive so many orders as well, but that part was actually a surprise to him. He's just glad they managed to get the orders taken care of in time. However, that very moment the Golden Country messenger comes back and says the Golden King wants to order an extra 100 units. Denisuk immediately starts having visions of how angry Sylphid is going to be when they tell her about the extra order, so he heads downstairs and prepares to beg for her cooperation so they can get it done. Sylphid isn't happy about it, but she agrees to do what she can to fill the additional orders, so she hires more workers and teaches them how to make the rosmarin. With the new workers on the job, they are making steady progress towards completion of the final 100 sets, so all that's left is to deliver it all. With continuous use, the rosmarin should last about a month, meaning the Golden King will have to keep buying from the demon army indefinitely, so this mission has been a resounding success for Denisuk. However, just as he was starting to relax, Oryulu comes running into his office and tells him the Golden King just cancelled the entire order. Denisuk begs Oryulu to say she's joking, but it's the truth. The Golden King cancelled all the remaining orders after receiving the first 100. This is a huge problem for them since they haven't gotten their gold payment yet, and they already blew a huge portion of the demon army's budget on the raw materials for the rosmarin. Because of this, budget of cuts had to be implemented, so the demi-human forces didn't get a new weapons shipment, and the merchants are left wondering if they should do business in another country. Denisuk is left wondering where he could have gone wrong with this deal and worries that he may have offended the Golden King somehow, but he's also wondering how there could be a rosmarin replica circulating in the market already. However, regardless of the reason, the demon army's funds have been drained because of his actions and morale is plummeting, so he feels like he needs to take responsibility. He goes to meet with the Demon King and tells him that this whole mess is his fault. The Demon King asks Denisuk why he thinks he is to blame for the current situation, so Denisuk explains that he was already aware of how self-centered and impatient the Golden King was, but he was so happy with the successful negotiations that he failed to consider the risks involved. He says he is willing to accept whatever punishment the Demon King has for him, but the Demon King has no intention of punishing him. One cannot be expected to succeed indefinitely, and no matter how well you plan, sometime bad thing just happens, so he doesn't blame Denisuk for the situation. What's important is that Denisuk learns from this, and uses it to improve himself in the future. Denisuk takes the Demon King's encouragement to heart, so he leaves the throne room, and the first thing he wants to do is formally apologize to the people who were affected by this mishap. First on the list are the troops under Genome who got their budget cut, but he runs into Genome at the bottom of the staircase, and she doesn't seem mad at him at all. Next he goes to Sylphid's room and tries to apologize to her as well, but she cuts him off and says she's just glad she can take a break now that she doesn't have to fill those orders anymore. Denisuk is glad she's not mad at him, so he leaves and starts thinking about any more people he might need to apologize to. However, all of a sudden, he gets stuffed in his sack and is dragged away. He thinks this must have been done by someone who wants revenge for all the trouble he caused, so as soon as he manages to free himself from the sack, he begins apologizing again. However, the one who kidnapped him turns out to be Elmandra, and she's not trying to get revenge, she just wanted to enjoy some meat with him. The two sit down together and Denisuk asks her if she's trying to cheer him up, and Elmandra gets all flustered, but she admits that that's exactly what she's trying to do. Denisuk thanks her for being so considerate, and Elmandra realizes this might be the perfect time to score some relationship time with Denisuk, so she starts scooting closer to him, but all of a sudden, Oryulu shows up behind the two of them, so Elmandra pulls away. Oryulu just wanted to offer the two of them some fruit, but upon getting closer, she realizes she may have interrupted a moment between them. Later on, in the night, Oryulu and Elmandra end up falling asleep. Denisuk covers them so they don't catch a cold, and he is grateful to have coworkers like them. The people here didn't condemn him for his failure and instead tried to cheer him up, so no matter what, Denisuk is going to make sure the demon army can rebound. At the same time, we see the Golden King as he is making a deal for the cheaper rosmarin. Since these are truly just as effective while costing only half the price, the Golden King didn't hesitate to switch suppliers, but he is curious as to how Butagarian managed to acquire the rosmarin. However, Butagarian says that's a trade secret, all with a smile on his face that means he definitely did something illegal. Now that Denisuk has come to terms with the situation, he starts trying to develop countermeasures, and the first step is to figure out how counterfeit rosmarin flooded the market. The counterfeits were presumably created in less than a month, but none of it makes sense to Denisuk since it would take ages for someone to reverse engineer the rosmarin and figure out how to make one. The only plausible explanation is that someone sold the rosmarin acquired from the demon army without permission. The demon army distributed rosmarin all across the nation, but only the areas that suffer severe monster attacks, and the people there wouldn't risk their safety for a quick profit. All of a sudden, Almandra bursts into Denisuk's office and tells him that the rosmarin that were distributed within the kingdom are reportedly ineffective, so now he has more than one problem to deal with. He and Almandra head to one of the villages that reported the ineffective rosmarin, and the place has been completely ransacked by magical beasts. Neither the village's chief nor Denisuk understand how something like this could have happened since the rosmarin are meant to keep all magical beasts at bay, but when Denisuk starts digging into the ground to see if there's something wrong with the rosmarin they bury here, he discovers a major problem: it's not there. He and the others check all the other spots where the rosmarin were hidden, and sure enough, every single one of the rosmarin is missing from its spot. This revelation leads Denisuk to believe that someone is stealing the rosmarin, but he needs to confirm it before he can take any action, so he asks Almandra to help him map out all the villages which have filed complaints about missing rosmarin. After a little planning, Denisuk takes Almandra out late at night to do some investigation, but she doesn't understand why they came to this particular village since no complaints have come from here. Just then Denisuk sees some movement in the field, so he tells Almandra to stay quiet, while they stay hidden behind this tree. They watch two suspicious people run around and eventually pull one of the rosmarin out on the ground, but just as the suspicious people were about to start leaving, they are confronted by Denisuk and Almandra. This is exactly what Denisuk had suspected, and it explains why the counterfeits had the same quality but were sold at such a low price. Someone is hiring thieves to steal the original so they can be resold, and since all the goods are stolen, the mastermind behind all this can sell the rosmarin for insanely low prices while still making a large profit. Denisuk asks the thieves to tell him who their employer is, but the thieves don't plan on giving him any information, and one of them lunges at Denisuk with its claws out. Luckily, Almandra comes to En's defense and knocks the thief out. The other one tries to attack her as well, but he gets knocked down as well, so the two thieves realize they stand no chance and start running away. Almandra is about to chase after them so they don't get away, but Denisuk tells her there's no need since the rosmarin they just stole are bombs. Figuratively, the following day Butagarian receives the stolen rosmarin, and as planned he presents them to the Golden King as requested. The Golden King is greatly pleased with Butagarian's work since he prepared a product just as good as the demon armies and did so at half the price. He even managed to make dozens of rosmarin in one night, which shouldn't be physically possible, but the Golden King isn't going to think about it too much. He praises Butagarian for being such an excellent merchant, and Butagarian accepts the praise because he prides himself on doing whatever it takes to make his customer happy. If it wasn't clear by now, Butagarian is a very wealthy merchant, but he's not an honest one. He earned all his money by buying things cheap and selling them at expensive prices, which normally wouldn't be that bad, but he's really shady about the way he conducts his business. When he first heard about the Rampage Kingdom forming a contract with the demon army, Butagarian immediately knew this would be a great opportunity to make a quick profit, so he got his hands on one of the rosmarin and tried to have his craftsman reverse engineer it so he could create his own, but unfortunately, his craftsman told him it was too complex to recreate, so Butagarian naturally moved on to the next best option. He stole the rosmarin directly from the demon army. Of course, what he did is very illegal and immoral too, but as long as Butagarian gets his goal, he doesn't care what he has to do. He leaves the Rampage Kingdom with his cart full of gold, and a few days later, he returns with more stolen Butagarian to sell to the Golden King, but to his surprise, as he approaches the front gate, he is stopped by the guards. The guards tell him that the Golden King has issued an order for his arrest, so they grab Butagarian and bring him to the king's throne room. Butagarian doesn't understand what's going on and asks the king why he was forcefully brought here, so the king pulls out one of the rosmarin that Butagarian sold to him on his previous visit and crushes it because it's a fake. All the rosmarin Butagarian brought were fake, so he wants an explanation. Butagarian can't believe it, and tries to assure the king that it is a misunderstanding because he would never try to pass off faulty goods to a man like him, but the king's patience is thinner than my hairline, so Butagarian isn't going to be able to talk his way out of this one. To make matters worse for him, there's someone else here who has something to say, so Denisuk walks out from the shadows and introduces himself to Butagarian. Butagarian is even more nervous than he was before because he has heard the rumors about Denisuk the demon army general, and he is absolutely terrifying. It is said that he had the power to bend the Minotaur and other powerful demi-humans to his will, and has achieved many other things in just a few months. Without a doubt, he's the most fearsome person in the demon army, so Butagarian is terrified by what Denisuk must have in store for him. Denisuk begins his statement by explaining that someone has been stealing the demon army's rosmarin recently, and he has reason to believe that Beardegarian is the one behind it. That is why, to put a stop to the theft, Denisuk had this developed, a perfect replica of the rosmarin. At first glance, it is identical to a real one but doesn't actually do anything though. Its design is so good that even the king couldn't tell that it was a fake, and Denisuk has Sylphid to thank for the flawless design. After he realized that someone was stealing the rosmarin, he went to her to ask for help creating the rosmarin replicas. Sylphid initially refused since something like that would require a ton of work, but Denisuk seemed pretty desperate, so she said she would do it, but in exchange for her work she wanted him to get her a cake. After Sylphid was done making the fake rosmarin, Denisuk used the map of village to figure out which village the thieves would likely target next, and went there ahead of time to set trap. Sure enough, thieves showed up and stole the fake rosmarin, but with that said, it's strange that Beardegarian is in possession of those same fake rosmarin. Beardegarian realizes he's majorly screwed because all this was part of Denisuk's plan to expose him, and he's doing it in front of the Golden King so there's no chance of Beardegarian escaping. No matter how he looks at it, his odds of survival aren't looking good, so Beardegarian uses his last resort and starts begging for his life. He apologizes to the king for his action, but he says he was only stealing the rosmarin so he could give the king the best deal possible, so he didn't know it was wrong. He's aware of how dumb that argument sounds, but it doesn't matter as long as it gets the king to spare his life. But unfortunately for Beardegarian, mercy isn't one of the king's strong suits, so he declares that he is sentencing Beardegarian to death. He uses his powers to create a lightning cage around Beardegarian, and then drops one of his crocodiles from the ceiling for a midday snack. Beardegarian screams in terror as he sees the hungry crocodile approaching him, and as he is slowly being attacked by it, he tries to flee, but there's nowhere to go. Hopelessness starts to set in as Beardegarian comes to terms with the fact that he will die here, and his final thought before he dies is of his children, and how he won't be able to take care of them anymore once he's gone. However, as the crocodile is about to chomp down on him, Denisuk uses his personal magic device to shoot a fireball at the crocodile. The king is enraged that Denisuk would dare to interfere with his execution. Denisuk was involved in the situation, so the king graciously allowed him to be present and make his case against Beardegarian, but that doesn't give him the right to interfere with state affairs. He asks Denisuk if he is willing to take responsibility for his actions, but Denisuk says he has a good reason for what he did, so he asks the king to hear him out. The king is even more enraged and unleashes his twin lightning dragons, but he is willing to listen to what has to say, so he lets him speak. First of all, Denisuk makes it clear that he is not doing this because he cares about Beardegarian, but he is doing it solely for the benefit of the Golden King. He claims that if Beardegarian is killed, then it will lead to the collapse of the Rampage Kingdom, but the king fails to see how a single dishonest merchant could be so important. However, when Denisuk mentions the orange powder, it gets the king's attention. The Rampage Kingdom was formed thanks to its gold mines and has continued to thrive ever since, but in recent years the amount of gold has diminished, which is why it is important to extract as much gold as possible from minerals, and to do this, orange powder is used. By applying magic to the powder, it is possible to extract nothing but gold from the dirt, and the person in charge of importing the orange powder is Beardegarian, so Denisuk tells the king that he can't kill him. The king still doesn't see why Beardegarian is so important, since he can just have another merchant handedly orange powder import, but Denisuk tells him that it won't work. The orange powder is obtained from the country of Toki, and due to many civil wars over it, Toki is now restricting the export of orange powder altogether, so it would be impossible for a new merchant to get his hands on some. However, Beardegarian is a special exception to the rule. Beardegarian wonders how Denisuk could possibly know all this, so he explains that he was looking into orange powder a while ago to see if he could get some and use it to manufacture gold for the demon army, but unfortunately, it's impossible for him. Anyway, back to Beardegarian. During one of the civil wars in Toki, the people were running out of food and supplies because no countries were supporting them and all the merchants had fled, but Beardegarian continued to trade in Toki even though it had become an active war zone at the time, and because of that Toki's economy managed to survive the war. That is why Toki as well as several other countries are indebted to Beardegarian, so he has received special permission to trade certain restricted goods. Even if some of his methods might be shady, Denisuk thinks it would be a shame to kill a merchant as skilled as Beardegarian. Denisuk's argument is quite compelling, so the king dispels his lightning dragon, but he still doesn't understand why Denisuk would go so far, since even if Beardegarian were to be killed and the Rampage Kingdom collapses, it would have nothing to do with the demon army. Plus, Beardegarian stole directly from the demon army, so his presence is a problem for them. However, Denisuk doesn't understand why the king is so confused, since it's natural to want to help someone if you see them in trouble. Both Beardegarian and the king are shocked by how innocent Denisuk, so much so that the king bursts out laughing and can hardly control himself. He's in a good mood now, so he decides to let Beardegarian live and leaves to go take a nap. Denisuk and Beardegarian are then kicked out of the throne room, but at least they are both alive. Butigarian is still wary of Denisuk since no ordinary man could make the king last so hard, so he assumes this was all part of Denisuk's plan, but in reality, Denisuk was quaking in his boots the entire time, so his legs are practically jelly now, and he needs help walking. Butigarian helps him walk and the two head for the exit, but as they are leaving, Orleala shows up along with all the thieves that were working for Butigarian, but it turns out that they aren't just thieves, they are Butigarian's children. The girls are glad to see that Butigarian is safe since they were sure the king would hurt him once the truth came out, but while he's glad to see them, he doesn't understand why the girls are here. Orleala explains that Denisuk asked her to find the girls and bring them here to see Butigarian. After the Kimozu incident with Butigarian, Denisuk did a little research on him, and at first, he looked like a crooked merchant, but then Denisuk found out about how he took in a bunch of war orphans and raised them as his own. Anyone who would do that can't be all bad, so Denisuk couldn't help but want to protect him. Butigarian can't believe Denisuk went so far for him and his children, so he's really grateful to him. Later, before Denisuk leaves, he offers Butigarian a contract to sell the Rosmarin on behalf of the demon army. Butigarian is in disbelief because why would Denisuk offer him such an important contract when he already ripped them off once before, but Denisuk says he trusts that Butigarian won't do anything like that again. Plus, the demon army is pretty busy, so they don't have time to market the Rosmarin to distant places, which is why he wants Butigarian to do it. Butigarian has touched that Dina is willing to trust him after what he did, so he swears that he will change his ways and make sure Denisuk never regrets doing business with him. Now that the deal has been finalized, Denisuk turns to leave, but before he does, Butigarian informs him of a rumor he heard. It looks like the guilds in the demon army territory are becoming active. Later, Denisuk and Almandra meet with the demon lord, and he is here to assign a pressing issue to them. The price of food in the nation has been on the rise recently, and it's starting to get so bad that the average citizen can no longer afford to eat. He wants Denisuk to find a solution to this problem at once, and Denisuk is more than happy to take on the task. He begins thinking about the issue and realizes that the high cost of food must be due to the guild control in the supply, but he doesn't understand why the guild would do such a thing. Almandra thinks the guild is doing all of this out of greed, so she offers to handle it, and knock some sense into the guild officials, but Denisuk thinks it'll take more than that to solve the problem. Just then the demon lord tells Denisuk he is dismissed so he can leave to start working on the food situation, but he has a separate assignment for Almandra because he needs her to head up north. Denisuk still doesn't know what motive the guild could have for increasing prices to such an extent, but if he wants to find out, then he's going to have to schedule a meeting with the guild master. A few days later is time for Denisuk's meeting with the guild master, so he prepares to head out, but as he is leaving, he is stopped by Sylphid, and she looks a lot different than usual. He asks her why she's dressed like that, so Sylphid says she's going to accompany him to the guild, but while she's in this outfit she wants him to refer to her as Belinda. A certain clan of elves currently holds officer positions within the guild, so she figured it would be easier for Denisuk if he had an elf with him during his discussions. Denisuk thanks her for her concern, but he doesn't think she needs to worry about him since he's going as a representative of the demon army, so there's no way the guild wouldn't take him seriously. When they arrive at the guild, and just as Belinda fear, they aren't being taken seriously because they end up being left to wait for 4 hours before the guild master actually comes outside to meet them, and when he finally does come out, the guild master Viper just says he forgot about them and shows no remorse whatsoever for making them wait. Denisuk is willing to overlook it, but Belinda isn't so forgiving, so she gets up in Viper's face, and now that he gets a good look at her, he recognizes her as his sister. He and Belinda are siblings, but they haven't seen each other in years since Belinda got exiled from her family years ago, and honestly, Belinda had hoped she would never have to see Viper's ugly face again, but since they are here, she tells him that Denisuk has business he wants to discuss. Denisuk is stunned to find out that Belinda is related to Viper, but that's a matter to discuss later. For now, he tells Viper that he wishes to purchase some grains from the guild because the current supply is too low. Viper ignorance of the issue, but he says that if Denisuk wants him to sell more food to the demon army, then he's going to have to get down on his knees and beg for it. Now most people with self-respect wouldn't even consider going through with it, but years as an underappreciated salaryman have erased all pride from Denisuk's body, so without hesitation he falls to his knees and begs Viper to sell him the food. Viper is shocked that he actually did it, and he finds Denisuk amusing, so he apologizes for joking around too much, and says he will sell him some food. However, he's selling at 50,000 gold for 1 bag of jim, which is ludicrously unreasonable, but he tells them that if they don't want to pay his price, then they don't have to buy it. He then turns to leave, but before he does, he gives Denisuk a little friendly advice. He way too careless with his pride because groveling like that in front of others will eventually turn him into a mockery. There's nothing more Denisuk or Belinda can do, so they leave the guild, but once they are outside, Belinda is still mad and suggests they should burn the whole place down along with Viper, but Denisuk thinks that might be going too far. Belinda doesn't understand how Denisuk can be so calm after he was humiliated in there for nothing, but for Denisuk, getting down on his knees isn't enough to hurt his pride, so he doesn't mind what happened. He's honestly still in shock that the guild master turned out to be Sylphid's younger brother. Sylphid decides to give him the full backstory and explains that she was born into an elven merchant family, but since elves have a hard time procreating, it is common for them to interbreed with other species. Sylphid herself is a cross between an elf and a fairy, while Viper is a cross between an elf and a lizard. As a result of this interbreeding, the children are often born with characteristics of their mixed species, so there are some who become obsessed with gathering wealth and fame, and that obsession lead them to burn down the elf village and sell their own brethren into slavery for profit. Sylphid was so disgusted by their behavior that she left the house, and since then she has had nothing to do with him, but now that she knows her scumbag brother is involved with the guild, there's no way she's going to let him go unchecked. Denisuk understands how she feels, but he wishes she would have at least given him a chance to talk to Viper before starting an argument with him. That aside, Sylphid asks him what he plans to do now because there's no way they can afford the ludicrous price that Viper set. Denisuk starts trying to think of a good plan of action, but just then he's approached by a little girl and she begs him to save her from the Lord Pent family. The girl's name is Nia and she tells Denisuk that she's being forced to work for the Lord Pent family, so she wants his help exposing the evil deeds they have committed. Denisuk takes a long hard look at the girl and then decides to help because she's cute, but before that, he wants to buy her some proper clothes. He takes Nia to a store and picks out a purple dress for her, and you can tell that he's having fun, but Sylphid is starting to get suspicious that Denisuk into little girls. Moving on, Denisuk asks Nia if she's willing to act as a whistleblower against the Lord Pent family, and she confirms it, so Denisuk takes her to a restaurant so he can listen to her story. According to what Nia says, the Lord Pent separated her from her family and forced her to work for the guild master. There are any other people like her who are forced to work for very little pay and is certainly bad, but Denisuk asks if she has any other information she can give him. Nia also tells him that there have been rumors spreading through town about a calamity approaching which will make it hard to buy food. However, all the rumors are being circulated by the guild to scare the people. This way the guild can raise their prices and the people will still buy it. Additionally, the guild also bought a lot of the existing Jimmu supply and are limiting access to so they can maximize profits. All this is pretty damning evidence, but most of the officers in the guild are from the Lord Pent family, and everyone else has been bribed, so nothing has been done about it. The merchant guild that was originally created to serve the common good has now come under the control of the Lord Pent family to serve their greedy desires. Denisuk intends to crack down on them, but to do that he's going to need concrete evidence. Sylphid thinks it would be a lot easier to catch Viper in a dark alleyway and kill him, and while that definitely would solve part of their problem, Denisuk wants to go about this fair and square. Viper controls people by using money as his weapon, so Denisuk plans to fight as well and use the demon army as his weapon, so with immediate effect Denisuk returns to the guild with Sylphid and Nia to perform an emergency audit of the guild. Viper realizes that Denisuk is trying to back him into a corner here because he has no right to refuse the audit, and if Denisuk and the others manage to find either the supply of Jimmu he has been hoarding or the transaction books, it would be enough to expose his monopoly. The reason Denisuk arrived so abruptly was because he couldn't risk giving Viper time to hide the evidence, but something seems off because Viper doesn't look like he's bothered by the surprise audit. He tells Denisuk to do whatever he wants, so Denisuk and the others head straight for the storage room. He remembers hearing from one of the villager nearby that they had sold a large amount of Jimmu to the guild recently, so there's no way Viper could possibly move all of it in time. However, as Denisuk opens the door to the storage room, he is shocked to find it completely empty. He can't believe what he is seeing, and as if to rub salt in his wounds, Viper along with the rest of the guild officials show up behind him and start laughing because Denisuk's plan failed. Denisuk can see skid marks on the floor, so he knows the Jimmu was here at some point. At a last-ditch attempt to catch Viper, he asks him how it's possible that the guild has no gem at all in storage, but Viper simply explains it away, saying he found a buyer for it yesterday. It's obviously a lie, but good luck proving that in court. Ultimately, Denisuk and Sylphid were forced to leave in defeat because they couldn't prove that Viper had done anything wrong. Even the guild ledgers had no inconsistency, so it's practically impossible to prove that Viper is engaging in fraudulent activities. Faking ledger documents is a lot harder than moving products, so Sylphid thinks Viper might have been conducting his illegal trades under the name of the Lord Pent family, and that would explain why all the ledgers were so spotless. But right now there's a more pressing matter at hand. It was clear that Viper had prepared for their audit in advance, but how could he have possibly known about it? It was supposed to be top secret, and he still managed to learn of it, and had enough time to hide the evidence. That must mean he received information from a mole, and given the circumstances that could only be one person. Meanwhile, back at the guild, Viper is laughing his butt off because of how stupid he made Sylphid and Denisuk look, and he couldn't have done it without Nia's help, so he praises her for being such a good backstabber. Nia thanks him with a deadpan expression on her face because she was just doing as she was instructed, but she's a bit curious as to how Viper managed to hide all that Jimmu, so she asks where he put it. Viper's expression turns cold and Nia realizes she might have angered him by asking a question, so she tenses up in fear as she prepares to get beaten once again, but fortunately for her, Viper is in a good mood, so he just pats her on the head and tells her he put all the Nia in a caravan. Viper used to work with a lot of horse carriages to transport goods, so using them to temporarily store all the Jimma was pretty easy. It's going to bring it all back to the guild once he knows it's safe, and speaking of safety, he tells Nia that her parents are still safe for now, but whether they stay safe depends entirely on Nia's actions. Nia was born as part of the Lord Pent family, but her branch was the lowest ranked among them all, so one day Viper just barged into her parents' home and demanded to take Nia with him because he needed a new secretary. Her parents didn't want to let it happen, but they couldn't refuse orders from the main house, so they were forced to give up their daughter. What followed was constant abuse at the hands of Viper because he didn't like how Nia's face reminded him of his older sister. Then one day he called her into his office and told Nia to become a spy for him. He knew Denisuk was a soft-hearted guy, so if he saw a pitiful little girl, he was bound to sympathize with her no matter how suspicious she was. Nia had no idea what happened if she were to get caught, but she couldn't refuse Viper's orders for her parents' sake. That afternoon Denisuk takes a stroll through town, and he is disheartened by all the gloomy and hungry people he sees around, so he needs to do something about it. He is so deep in thought that he doesn't notice Almandra standing right in front of him. She eventually manages to snap him out of it, and Denisuk is surprised to see her because he thought the demon lord sent her on a mission in the north. Almandra says he's right, but she just got back and she brought back some souvenirs too. She was sent up north to deal with some wyverns that were terrorizing the villages there, and wyverns are huge deadly creatures, so it wasn't easy. She managed to take out 30 wyverns altogether, and she brought them back with her as trophies of her victory. Denisuk thinks about what Almandra just told him, and it gives him a great idea, so he tells her she's amazing. Almandra blushes a little from Denisuk's compliment, but Denisuk has already started working on logistics. 30 wyverns should be more than enough for what he is planning, so he has finally come up with a solution to their guild problem. Denisuk calls Nia back to his office to help again, and since the surprise inspection of the guild failed, he has come up with a new plan to deal with the situation, and he calls it Dragon Strike. Nia still has to collect information for Viper, so she asks Denisuk if he can explain the plan to her, but just then Almandra and Oriolu enter the room. They are here to tell Denisuk that they finished the first batch of the smoked wyvern, and with the cooking method he suggested, it actually tastes really good. Denisuk then explains that he plans to distribute the wyvern meat throughout the region in order to solve the current food shortage, and this way they won't have to worry about the guild hoarding the Jimma's supply. Nia realizes that this will be a huge problem for Viper, so she needs to find out as much as she can about it, otherwise Viper will get mad. She asks Denisuk how he plans to distribute the smoked meat, and Denisuk is about to tell her all about it, but before he does, Sylphid stops him. She tells him it might not be a good idea to share that information right now, and Nia realizes that Sylphid might be onto her scheme, but even so she can afford to disappoint Viper. Later that evening, she sneaks back into Denisuk's office and starts rummaging through his files to find the distribution information, and once she does, she attempts to sneak out unnoticed. Unfortunately for her, Sylphid was right there waiting for her, so Nia has been caught red-handed. Sylphid tells Nia she should be ashamed of herself for deceiving Denisuk because he genuinely wanted to help her. Nia says Sylphid has no right to lecture her because all this is her fault to begin with. She then throws a smoke bomb on the ground to create a distraction and escapes from the castle. She manages to make it back to the guild and informs Viper of the smoked wyvern distribution plan, but Viper doesn't think smoked wyvern will be enough to replace his Jimma. Even so, if people end up well fed, they won't be desperate enough to pay Viper's extortive prices, so he's going to interfere as much as possible. He asked Nia where Denisuk plans to begin distribution of the wyvern meat, and according to what Nia saw, distribution is meant to begin at the center of the city, but she doesn't want to give him that information. She knows Viper is going to try and stop the distribution, so as a small act of defiance, she lies and tells him that the distribution is going to begin in the suburbs. Unfortunately, Viper doesn't believe her. He knows she is lying because Denisuk is a reasonable man, and the most reasonable and time-efficient location to be in distribution would be Center Street. Nia tries to claim that Denisuk is just starting from the suburbs to throw Viper off his scent, but Viper knows Denisuk wouldn't do something like that. When the two of them met, he realized that Denisuk is naive, but he is also very careful, so he wouldn't do something so reckless. But anyway, since the distribution is happening tomorrow, Viper has no reason to worry about it, since by tomorrow morning the carriages is carrying all the Jimma will return to the city, and since all the people are practically starving, they'll buy it all up in an instant no matter what price he sets, so even if Denisuk distributes the wyvern meat later in the day, Viper would have made his profit by then. But that aside, Nia did try to lie to him, so Viper says he's going to punish her now, and he will make sure her punishment is completely unbearable. Meanwhile, back at the Demon Lord's castle, Sylphid tries to convince Denisuk to put a hold on the wyvern distribution plans because by now Nia must already told Viper all about it. However, Denisuk already knew this would happen. In fact, He knew Nia was a spy from the first moment he met her. When Nia first came up to him, he noticed a bruise on her neck, and when he took her to buy some clothes, she picked out clothes that covered her entire body, even though demons like her should like more revealing clothes. This led Denisuk to believe that her entire body must be covered in bruises, and that means she must have been abused by Viper for a long time. However, throughout the time they spent together, Nia never once mentioned anything about her abuse, which raised Denisuk's suspicion, but what made him sure that Nia was a spy was the look in her eyes. Back when he was a salaryman, he had 3 coworkers whom he was really close to, and they all wanted to bring about good change within the organization, but one by one the higher-ups of the company made their lives a living hell. Everything from public humiliation, demotions, and backbreaking work was used to crush their spirit, and eventually all of them lost the shine in their eyes. That's the same way Nia's eyes looked to Denisuk, devoid of life and willing to do whatever it takes to survive, so even though she was a spy, he still feels bad for her. Sylphid tells Denisuk that he is being naive, but regardless of that, they still need to come up with a plan of action against Viper. Viper is currently in a meeting with all his subordinates, and he is very confident that no matter what Denisuk does, he won't be able to stop them from selling their gym before the meat distribution begins. Viper can't wait to see the disappointed look on Sylphid's face when he comes out victorious, and he also has something planned involving Nia, and she looks absolutely dead inside. The next morning Viper is woken up by one of his men, and he has bad news for him. He tells Viper that his Jimmy shipment hasn't arrived yet, but Viper doesn't seem too worried since there should still be plenty of time before Denisuk starts distributing the meat, but on the contrary, his subordinate tells him that the demon army has already begun distribution, and they aren't distributing meat, they are distributing Jim. This sends Viper into a panic because he hadn't anticipated the possibility that Denisuk would distribute food so early, and Viper doesn't understand how Denisuk could have possibly gotten his hands on so much Jim. As he runs down the stairs, he finds Sylphid standing there, and she's here to explain exactly why Viper failed. All the Jimu in the country was monopolized by the guild, but there was still one way they could obtain it, and that was by importing it from neighboring countries. With a little help from a certain merchant they know, they were able to amass a decent amount of Jimu for the people and transported it here using ox carts. Viper asks if this means the smoked wyvern distribution was just a bluff, but Sylphid tells him they really did distribute the smoked wyvern. However, they distributed it to the neighboring countries to trade for the Jimu. Viper is flustered now, but he still doesn't think Sylphid to telling him the truth because there's no way they could have coordinated all the trade and importation so quickly, so he's sure they must have stolen the Jimma from somewhere, but Sylphid tells Viper that he is just short-sighted. He's right that it wouldn't have been possible to coordinate their plan in a single day, but Denisuk had been working on this long before he even met Viper, so this entire time, Viper has just been playing into Denisuk's hands. Jimmu can now be obtained for free, so no one is going to purchase it from the guild anymore, and she's sure Viper used his own money to purchase all that Jimmu, so he must be drowning in debt right now. She's not wrong, but Viper refuses to accept defeat, so he laughs in her face and says there's no way he would ever lose. He then runs off, but when Sylphid tries to go after him, she gets attacked by 2 ninjas. Viper hired his guards. Sylphid jumps back to create some space, and she was hoping to give this sword to Denisuk for emergencies, but there should be no harm in testing it against these guys. One of the ninjas tries to hit her with an energy blast, but Sylphid intercepts it, and thanks to the sword's special properties she's able to absorb and redirect the blast as fire magic. The sword's magic attack was effective, but its output was lower than expected, so she's going to have to tweak it a little when she gets back to her lap, but it's not like she needs the sword to finish this fight in the first place because she easily slams the second ninja against the ceiling with her magic. Viper is angrily pacing down the hall thinking about all the money he just lost, but he is still the guild master, so he is sure he can recover his losses eventually. He just needs to lay low for a while until people forget about what he did, but as he tries to escape through the back door, he finds Denisuk and all the other merchants of the guild waiting for him. Denisuk cuts straight to the point and tells Viper that he just held a vote among the other merchants, and according to the majority vote, Viper is no longer the guild master. Viper can't believe what he's hearing, but Denisuk makes it very clear that he is being removed from his position as the guild master. Furthermore, the entire Lord Pent family is being kicked out of the guild. He tells Viper he can check the votes personally if he wants to, but Viper slaps the papers out of Denisuk's hand and tells him he's not going to accept this. He demands to know who voted against him and swears to make them pay for what they have done. However, Denisuk tells him he can't threaten the other merchants anymore because they all chose to participate in the vote, and the reason they are so firm in their decision is because they listened to Nia's speech. Earlier Denisuk found Nia locked in the guild cellar, and he was glad he found her because he needed her to show the other merchants what type of man Viper truly was. Nia understood what Denisuk was trying to do, so she decides to go along with it, and after meeting all the merchants, she told them about all of the wicked things Viper did to her. He's an unstable psychopath, and if they don't do something about him soon, he's going to bring about the downfall of this guild. All the merchants sided with her and agreed to vote him out, which brings us back to this moment. Viper is shocked that the merchants were swayed by sympathy towards Nia since he was sure they would only act in their best interest, but he failed to consider that not everyone is okay with beating up girls like he is. He then tries to threaten Nia by reminding her that he has power over her parents, but Nia is done bending to his will, so she says she will support her parents on her own. Denisuk then tells Viper that he has no right to be making threats in his current position. As of this moment, the Lord Pent family is no longer allowed to do business within this country, and once news of what he did spreads, the neighboring countries are sure to ban him as well. This is finally starting to dawn on Viper that he's in major trouble, so he falls to his knees and starts begging Denisuk have mercy on him. He says it's not his fault that he created a food shortage and starved the people of the Demon Kingdom. Anyone could have made that mistake. Viper remembers hearing that Denisuk forgave Butagarian despite all the bad things he did, so he's sure he can get Denisuk to let him go if he pretends that he's sorry. However, Denisuk is no fool. Butagarian was an exception, but Denisuk is naive enough to give scum like Viper a second chance. He knows Viper is faking his remorse, but he tells him that if he really wants to atone for his wrongdoing, then he is going to have to go to prison for his crimes. After seeing that Denisuk won't forgive him, Viper immediately jumps back and angrily attempts to attack him, but before he could get to Denisuk, Sylphid appears behind him and slashes his back. Soon after, Viper is tied up and is being hauled off to prison. Before he is taken away, Denisuk tells him that a thorough investigation of all his crimes will be conducted and then he will receive an adequate punishment. However, Viper tells Denisuk that even if he lost this brown, it doesn't mean Denisuk has won, because a great calamity will still befall this kingdom, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. Viper then bursts out in maniacal laughter, so Sylphid smacks him on the head to shut him up and he is dragged off to jail. Denisuk is a little worried about what Viper said, but Nia calls his attention because she wants to apologize to him. She took advantage of his trust even though he was so kind to her, so she asks him to punish her so she can atone for her mistake. Denisuk tells her to follow him to his office where Nia expects to be punished, but to her surprise she is offered a job as Denisuk's secretary instead. Denisuk tells her that because she acted as a spy against the demon army, she has the choice of either serving serious jail time or being punished with forced labor as his secretary with full salary and benefits. At least that's the cover story Denisuk came up with, but in reality, this was all part of a deal he struck with her father. Viper had put Nia's father in charge of his Jimmy carriages because he thought he had a full control over Nia and her family, but Nia's father betrayed him and broke one of the carriages to stall the caravan. That's why Viper's gym shipment was late, and they were able to defeat him so swiftly. Denisuk plans to reform the guild now that Viper is gone, and to do that he is going to need as many talented people as possible, so he asks Nia if she's willing to come work for him, and Nia happily accepts. Everything seems to be going well for Denisuk, but his good mood doesn't last long because the Demon Lord just called for him, and it sounds like an emergency. At the same time, an incredibly large court of wyverns is heading for the Demon Kingdom, and it looks like it's going to cause a lot of trouble.